Yes, everybody, welcome back to Talking Walls. Welcome back to a brand new update video on the channel. Hope you guys are keeping well and safe. Should only be a quick one today. There's not been huge amounts of news over the last couple of days. Just a quick update on some of the rumours and a quick update on Pedro Lima as well, who's set to join Wolves from the 1st of July. We did have a little bit of news as well on season tickets. Obviously, the season ticket renewal window is closed now. Wolves have opened it up from Friday, I think, to see if you want to change seats and relocate. But Liam Keane from the Express and Star has reported that 90% of people have renewed their season tickets ahead of the 24-25 season. Now, it still sounds quite a high number, but that still means over 2,000 Wolves fans have not renewed ahead of the new season. Of course, a little bit disappointing. A lot of people would have been put off by prices and so on, and the way that the club have treated fans with the price rises, which I fully do appreciate and understand as well. But still, quite a lot of Wolves fans to be missing out on their beloved clubs, really. And it's a shame, and obviously I really hope this is a wake-up call for the club with how they've sort of treated fans in this particular situation, and fingers crossed this sort of thing doesn't happen again and fans are consulted and considered a lot more in these sorts of situations. Thankfully though, the club are focusing on the transfer window, it seems anyway. Of course, after the signing of Rodrigo Gomez, the club, there was big news on Monday that the club were looking very close to signing Pedro Lima, the young Brazilian fullback. There's been some more news on that. Like I've said earlier on, he's set to join on his 18th birthday, which is at the start of July, where he'll come to Wolverhampton to have his medicals and so on. The news from Brazil is that Wolves did go and watch him play for Sport Recife a month or so ago, where Wolves then went on to meet with his representatives just a couple of days later to put forward a plan and proposal of the Wolverhampton Wanderers project to him. Of course, as you would have seen already reported, Chelsea were heavily linked with Lima as well, and even went back in to offer more money and a better contract for him to join, which he rejected because the player felt that Wolves was a much more attractive proposal. The player wants to play in the 2026 World Cup, which is just a couple of years away, and obviously playing in the Premier League makes that a lot more attainable for him as a football player. Now, Manchester City were also heavily interested in Pedro Lima, but like Chelsea, all they wanted to do was sign him and loan him straight back out. Of course, Chelsea have got their sort of Blueco group of different teams, and it's more than likely that Pedro Lima was going to be going out to Strasbourg over in France. With City, they've got a lot of clubs. More than likely, it would have been maybe Girona over in Spain. So with Wolves, a player can definitely play Premier League, and obviously they're giving him some sort of a pathway to the first team as well, which is massive for us and for the football player as well. So Pedro Lima to Wolves. Fingers crossed we should see something happening, and hopefully some official pictures within the next sort of 2 weeks or so. I'm really looking forward to seeing how he can develop as a young player at Molineux. Of course, at the age of 17 at the moment, will turn 18. By the time he's 21, he'll become a homegrown player as well in the UK, which is massive for Wolves. Makes the player a lot more valuable as well. So fingers crossed it's a successful signing for the club. Now, one player who it's quite surprising that there's such big interest in him is Max Kilman, obviously the Wolves captain right now, and there's big interest from West Ham United. Now, there has been interest reported from West Ham previously now, but now Julian Lopetegui has joined West Ham. The interest seems to have ramped up slightly, and according to some reports, Max Kilman is West Ham United's #1 target for this summer. Lopetegui seems to be desperate to be reunited with the Wolves captain, and some reports suggesting that Wolves value Kilman at around £45 million. Now, although that's the Wolves valuation, you could take a little bit of negotiation. I think you could, in and around that sort of £35 to £40 million mark, which is still a lot of money. If Wolves sold Kilman for that much, does that mean we've got the flexibility and the finances to then possibly go on and keep the likes of Pedro Neto? Maybe. But very interesting that Kilman is one of those targets, of course. He's, in my opinion, is a little bit of a Marmite player. I certainly, feel that he is a good footballer, but is he restricted a little bit to a back five? And if Wolves want to eventually move to a back four, has Kilman got the capability to do that? I'm not so sure. West Ham United, obviously, in London, closer to where Kilman originates from. So I don't know. Very, very interesting. And when a manager, look, Lopetegui left Wolves in a horrible way, but he's still a reputable manager. And if a manager of that caliber admires you and makes you his number one target, sometimes it does sway players. So very interesting to see what happens with this one. But will West Ham pay that sort of money? Because it's not quite their transfer record, but it's very close to what they would have paid for the likes of Lucas Paqueta a couple of years ago. In regards to a potential replacement, Wolves were also linked last night to the Dutch defender Thomas Bielen, currently playing for Feyenoord, who finished second in the Eredivisie last season, obviously under the new Liverpool manager Arne Slot. Bielen's an interesting one because he was in and around the squad for all of the last season, but he really broke into the Feyenoord squad for the second half of the last campaign. And in every league game and Dutch Cup game that he played, they never lost. He did not lose a single game in Holland last season, if you're disregarding the European games. So, domestically he had a fantastic campaign and still only young at 23 years of age. Very intrigued to see if this is a player that Wolves end up going for. The centre-back, 23 years of age, Thomas Bielen. Very early days on that one as of right now. Now, a couple of young players as well have been... there's a lot of interest in a couple of the Wolves' young players. Now, an interesting one is Alvin Ayman, who I believe Wolves signed from Bradford Way a few years ago. Still only 16 years of age. Played predominantly as a central midfielder for Wolves, but can play at the back as well as a defender. Liverpool now are reportedly close to agreeing a deal for him. That's according to The Secret Scout, and a few other publications have jumped on that as well. Alvin Ayman was actually with the Wolves' first team squad when they travelled to Manchester City later on in the season. And the compensation for Ayman, if that goes through, could go up to £1.5 million. So it's a shame when players of that age get poached, especially by the bigger clubs. I suppose that's how they do it. Saying that Wolves would have poached Ayman from sort of Bradford a few years ago. It's just how, unfortunately, the football structure and the youth academies work here in England. And another one is obviously Wesley Okudua, now probably a little bit more of a reputable name to Wolves fans because he was in the Wolves squad a number of times throughout last season, especially towards the end of the campaign. 16 years of age, Wesley Okudua now. And Chelsea are also actively pursuing a deal for Wesley Okudua. They're really pushing it. As far as I'm aware, and I was concerned, there was a meeting between some parties over the last couple of days or so, which may well have decided talks or accelerated talks. Talks are said to be ongoing with Wolves about a fee, but as far as Wolves are concerned, they don't really want to sell Okudua. He's, again, sort of similar to Pedro Lima. There's a clear pathway to potential first-team football, but saying that, you've got Pedro Lima, who's a young 17-year-old wing-back at the moment, and Wesley Okudua, who's very young at 16 as well. Will the signing of Lima have any sort of impact on the future, potentially, of Wesley Okudua? But whatever happens, because he's been featuring in first-team squads and so on, Wolves can demand a lot more money for Wesley Okudua than what they would have for someone like Alvin Ayman, for argument's sake. And I'm sure Wolves will back themselves up with future fees and percentages if players were to move on. And finally, sticking on the subject of youth players, Leon Chiwomi, he's set to sign a new contract at Wolves, of course, had a couple of first team appearances and played in the FA Cup as well for Wolves last season. He's set to sign a new deal till 2028 at the club, and it's thought now that he's expected to stay in and around the Wolves team next season, whether that be for the under-21s or even the first team, which then will allow Nathan Fraser to go out and get some much needed first team exposure and first team experience next season. So there we go with the update for today, guys. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below on any of the news that you've heard today. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll catch you guys next time.